Applying an intersectional lens is so important in this work, especially because we've known for a long time that women, gender diverse folks who are, also racialized, Indigenous, disabled, queer, trans, and any combination of the above have different experiences of tech-facilitated gender-based violence that really white, cis, able-bodied women don't experience.
Why is there still an intersectional gap in our data about gender digital abuse? I'm Andrea Gunrad from the Canadian Women's Foundation. Welcome to All Right, Now What? A podcast from the Canadian Women's Foundation. We put an intersectional feminist lens on stories that make you wonder, why is this still happening? We explore systemic roots and strategies for change that will move us closer to the goal of gender justice. The work of the Canadian Women's Foundation and our partners takes place on traditional First Nations, Métis, and Inuit territories. We are grateful for the opportunity to meet and work on this land. However, we recognize that land acknowledgements are not enough. We need to pursue truth, reconciliation, decolonization, and allyship in an ongoing effort to make right with all our relations. Whether you're on social media, streaming platforms, dating, messaging, and meeting apps, or on game sites, if you're a woman, girl, or two-spirit, trans, or non-binary person, you're at greater risk of hate, harassment, and violence. This behavior can take lots of forms, like threatening or damaging communication, cyberstalking, non-consensual distribution of intimate images, online dating abuse, hacking, doxing, that's publishing private information about someone online, flaming, that's posting insults or personal attacks, impersonation, and gendered and sexualized disinformation. Over coming months, we're delving into gender digital hate and harassment with leading experts and content creators, releasing in-depth episodes every single week. We talk about the problem and what we can do to change it. We offer practical tips to help you in your digital life, and we talk about what it means to take back the tech for all of us. Studies show that the people who experience more unwanted behavior online include young women, Black, Indigenous, and racialized women, and 2S LGBTQIA+ people. Still, research is thin when it comes to exploring the nuances of gender digital abuse in the lives of those most vulnerable. For instance, very little focuses on the experiences and perspectives of racialized women in Canada. Our guest, Dr. Nasreen Rajani, has been working on issues of gender-based violence for about 7 years through her research and nonprofit advocacy. Her dissertation examined how racialized and Indigenous activists across Canada use digital tools to end gender-based violence. She's been a volunteer and board member with Women's Initiatives for Safer Environments and is an advisor to Women's Legal Education and Action Fund on their technology-facilitated gender-based violence project. Nasreen is a member of the Ottawa Coalition to End Violence Against Women's Black and Racialized Person Caucus. In 2022, she published a paper in the Canadian Journal of Law and Technology entitled, "I Bet You Don't Get What We Get," an intersectional analysis of technology-facilitated violence experienced by racialized women anti-violence online activists in Canada.
For the past decade, I've been really involved in ending gender-based violence, and more specifically around how about the use of digital technologies for about a decade now. So I've been a graduate student studying technologies from a critical and intersectional feminist lens. I recently wrote my dissertation on the topic of how racialized and Indigenous Canadian women were using a variety of digital tools for their activism to end gender-based violence. This included discussions of their experiences of receiving hate and harassment on those digital platforms they were using, so what we call more broadly as technology-facilitated violence.
Tell us more about your research and what you found in applying that missing intersectional lens to the issue of gender digital hate and harassment.
As beneficial as we often think that so many of the digital technologies we use to connect with, to build communities of support, to provide a space for solidarity and activism around ending gender-based violence, these same tools are also used to inflict harm, and especially on equity-deserving groups. Applying an intersectional lens is so important in this work, especially because we've known for a long time that women, gender diverse folks who are, also racialized, Indigenous, disabled, queer, trans, and any combination of the above have different experiences of tech facilitated gender based violence that really white, cis, able bodied women don't experience. So unfortunately, though so much of the academic research and media coverage in the past has focused solely on the latter and their experiences. And so that was really a big part of my reason for focusing my research at looking at the specific experiences of those who are racialized. And I interviewed racialized and Indigenous women across Canada, some of whom were also queer and disabled. For instance, racialized and Indigenous folks have a very different relationship than white women with police. And so the constant kind of response that we hear to just go to the police in these matters, as a first resort, your computer and delete your account, that is just not sufficient. So again, these assumptions we have are primarily based on a certain group of people. And so focusing on that intersectional lens really pivots our focus to looking at how different women, different gender diverse folks are having these experiences, and then how to kind of better, once we understand that more, we can come up with kind of better responses and solutions.
What research learnings really surprised you?
I think it was most surprising and wonderful to hear what all the women I spoke with for my research were just so innovative and creative in how they use technology for their own activism. We often hear stories about Twitter posts, Twitter hashtags, for instance, was a really huge thing in the media and a lot of academic research. But for the women that I interviewed, it wasn't always relying on typical Twitter posts and hashtags, but there are all these different spaces they created for themselves to build communities of support, to connect with others, as well as to reach out to more general populations to educate them and bring awareness to some of these issues. And some of them, included podcasts, for instance, what we're doing right now, that a few years ago wasn't as common, but also creating video games, forming communities within, even the private message features of social media platforms. So not relying just solely on the public facing features. Research and media we've heard about in the past is always really focused on Twitter and Facebook, the public facing posts, but there's just so much more that's going on. And so that was just really exciting for me to also learn about. And I had hints about this, just being a social media, as someone who's plugged in a little bit into social media, that there was a little bit more going on that I was starting to see that was beyond the hashtag. So allowing myself to dive deeper into this, really it brought me to kind of more creative ways and innovative ways that these women were using tools for their own activism. But my research was conducted also before TikTok. So, I imagine there's so much going on there as well that unfortunately I wasn't able to include in my research, but I'm sure others now are doing so. And I'm sure I wouldn't be surprised if there's also a lot going on newer platforms that have come up since.
I read your work drawing out the difference between living in media versus living with media. That distinction seems essential. Can you talk about it?
A way to think about this is most of us are completely immersed in a digital world, and especially since COVID, we rely so much on digital technologies for so many of our everyday aspects. So being online to work, to shop for essentials, to learn, to connect with friends and family in our communities when, social distancing was much more prioritized. It brings benefits and conveniences to our everyday. We are not in a space anymore where most of us can easily just disconnect or just shut down our computers and walk away from digital technology. So that would be what is meant by saying we're living in, as opposed to living with, where maybe as the internet and social media were just starting to be a part of every day, it was a lot easier to just like, let's turn off the video game, let's step away from Twitter and Facebook. But now, our world has changed so much and so quickly with digital technologies that the separation of being online and offline is so difficult for so many of us to have. So, but just as much benefit, I guess, as we reap from being so immersed with all kinds of digital technologies are also reinforcing and amplifying a lot of systemic discriminations and oppressions that impact some of us a lot more than others. So some of those examples that I shared earlier from some of my research, you can't just tell people who rely on being online to stop being online just because they're facing violence. And now that's a reality for so many of us who are online almost all the time for our everyday and all of our necessities.
How about solutions? What needs to change to make all women and gender diverse people safer in their digital lives?
I don't like the idea that the onus should be on us as individuals who are experiencing violence to protect ourselves. It's really just such a shame, that we can't rely on law enforcement in our legal communities for so many reasons, especially for the fact that they're just still not well equipped to know how to deal with this. Law is so slow in catching up to the world that we currently experience. And there's also just so little trust that equity deserving communities have with law enforcement that it's really just not an option for so many. Similarly, we can't rely on digital platforms to make change to their policies and guidelines in favor of those experiencing gender-based violence on their systems. We've seen time and time again how little they understand the issues, how little they care to react. So, we'll see things like posts being removed, maybe some accounts suspended, but it's not getting to the roots of the problem or really stopping much of the violence that's experienced. And it's also, again, another slow process. And ultimately, these platforms prioritize profits. So profits increase as things like trolling on their platforms are used. So it brings visibility and users to the platform. So they're not going to be quick to try to remove that on any kind of like systemic level. But I do think it's important to try to have a community of support around you, those people that you can rely on to help you get through this time, but also to help collect evidence on your behalf and to advocate on your behalf. I recognize this isn't so readily available to everyone. So I think that we, as individuals who are invested in seeing a stop to this can really, see where we can lend a hand to those in need with whatever it is they might need in terms of support. Similarly, in cases of gender-based violence that doesn't rely on technology is really listening to what those individuals, what it is that they need and not pushing, like go to the police, not pushing things on them or even if they don't want to make a complaint and just, kind of talk about it, is to just be there for people. You don't have to look very far to see what's going on. So just being aware and educating yourselves as to what's going on and not just ignoring it, because I think that's what, our legal system, law enforcement, and the social media platforms, that's what they're relying on, is that, people will just ignore it. So it must not be that big of a deal. So I think more advocacy to all of the above, on more advocacy to platforms from everyone, not just those experiencing it, but those who've witnessed it and observing this. So to platforms, to law enforcement, and to policymakers, and to really take this not only more seriously, but also start being aware from it, or continue being aware of it from an intersectional perspective that prioritizes even the experiences and needs of those from intersectional equity deserving groups. When they do start to pay attention, it's the importance of bringing that intersectional perspective and not losing sight of that, and not kind of going backwards almost to looking at just the gender aspect or just the racial aspect, but that these are inherently linked and we can't separate these in the lives of everyone's experiences.
Would you recommend any powerful resources, research, or tools to our listeners?
I know that the work that LEAF is doing has been really fantastic in this area. So LEAF is the Women's Legal Education and Action Fund. They're a Canadian-based nonprofit, and they've been doing a lot of great work on technology-facilitated gender-based violence advocacy. A really great resource out there is they recently released a report about technology facilitated violence. It's a plain language guide that really outlines the steps that are available for those experiencing tech facilitated gender-based violence, especially as it involves engaging the legal community, if that's a step that you wish to take. What's also really great about it is it brings together all of those kind of the legal options that are available to you if you wanted to press charges from a civil or kind of a criminal perspective, and really outlines like what that looks like, what you need to do to take on those steps. That kind of resources is so important for those, again, who wish to take that step, because it is so confusing. And again, so many lawyers still don't take this seriously or just have enough education. So it's great that LEAF has put together this resource that really just makes it clear these are some of the options that are available at the moment. This is what you can expect, and this is kind of how to navigate that way. Words used or like how people speak about legal issues is not always accessible to so many people, especially when you want like, just what can I do? Give me like a quick and dirty, like I need to know what my options are, instead of like you yourself going through like a Google rabbit hole and not really understanding what's happening. My research took place again before COVID. So the ones that I have like in the past referred to may not be relevant now or just even existing now, because we know sometimes when it comes to research, they're outdated. So I would suggest like a good Google search, will go a long way in finding these things, especially looking to, again, alternatives to social media, but looking to podcasts like this, and others, mobile games, looking into maybe it's like TikTok posts or influencers who are engaging in this work in a way to just trying to connect with as many people as possible. And then I'd suggest when you do find these, like share them as widely as possible, because most likely there are people in your circle who can benefit it, but are just not in a place to be able to go and look for this support. So having it as easily accessible, of people sharing it, really, really, that increasing the visibility goes such a long way. At least in Ontario, where I'm based, a lot of local kind of shelters and rape crisis centers, sexual assault centers have been doing a lot of work on the ground and creating some local guides on. So when survivors of violence come in, they have something prepared similar to the work that LEAF has been doing. Like, here's a plain language guide on how to protect yourself. But again, I think the onus should be on the community care and activism as we kind of advocate and really just support one another.
All right, now what? Check out the guide from Women's Legal Education and Action Fund entitled Unacceptable: Responding to Technology-Facilitated Gender-Based Violence at leaf.ca. Get the facts on gender digital hate, harassment, and abuse by visiting our fact page on CanadianWomen.org. While you're there, read about our new Feminist Creator Prize to uplift feminist digital creators advocating for gender justice, safety, and freedom from harm. Did this episode help you? Did you learn anything new? We want to know. Please visit this episode's show notes to fill out our brief listener survey. You'll be entered to win a special prize pack. This series of podcast episodes has been made possible in part by the Government of Canada. Please listen, subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. If you appreciate this content, please consider becoming a monthly donor to the Canadian Women's Foundation. People like you will make the goal of gender justice a reality. Visit CanadianWomen.org to give today, and thank you for your tireless support.